We all search for that spark which fuels our desire to fully engage in our lives. We look for the courage to experience moments where we can come alive instead of watching life pass us by. You're listening to the Front Row Factor, leaving fear and insecurity behind by exploring stories of top performers that are living life in the front row. Get ready to stand up, step up, and live it up with your host, John Vroman.
Front Row family, John Vroman here. Super excited that you're with me today because I'm bringing to you Chris Lochhead, the co-founding partner at Play Bigger Advisors. I can't wait to tell you all about Chris and why you're going to love this show. But before we do, I want to give you some good news happening inside the Front Row community. As I record this today, our webpage for the Dads Retreat went live. Now, this is an event I'm so excited about. This is the event I've been looking to attend myself. And I'll tell you why. Not so long ago, I had two experiences that would cause me to rethink my role as a father. One is that I was at a party and somebody said, "John, what do you do?" I'd normally say I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, or I do this thing with a charity or a podcast. But I said, I'm a dad and I'm a husband. But when I'm not doing that, I happen to do these other things. And that shift for me was really important. The second thing that happened was I was looking at my computer one day and I saw all these folders for all these different categories of my life. One was for work and one was for, our family vacation and one was for taxes, but I didn't have a single folder for my family. And I thought, man, I need to focus on creating the future, the vision, the strategy for my family in the same way I would all these other important areas of my life. And then I thought, well, how do I like to learn? How am I going to go about doing that? I love live events. I love immersion experiences. I think there's great value in kind of breaking out of the normal routine, getting a little space. And also, sometimes I feel like in a 2-day event, I can learn so much more than I can trying to put 2 hours here and 2 hours there all throughout the year. It could really build some momentum. So I thought, man, I really need to focus on being a great dad. What event could I go to? And nothing came to mind. So I was like, I have 20 years of event planning experience. I'm going to host an event. We've got all the greatest guys in our community. Why not bring them together for the sole purpose of becoming outstanding dads? And so that's what we're doing. Even before the webpage went live today, this thing is 70% sold out. So if you'd like to apply to attend, go to frontrowfactor.com/dads. There's a quick video there. There's information there and you can apply. And if we happen to be sold out, you can join our wait list for our future events. But I will tell you, this one is going to rock. We've got Jim Shields, author of The Family Board Meeting. My buddy Larry Hagner, host of The Good Dad Project, author of The Dad's Edge, is going to be there. You get to hang and learn with Larry. You get to hear from Larry. And my buddy Hal Elrod, author of The Miracle Morning. It is a lineup of amazing guys. It's a relatively small event. So if you're interested, you might want to take action now. But that's it for the Dad's Retreat. If you've got questions, hit me up. You can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Facebook, or you can just shoot me an email, Jon, at frontrowglobal.com. Now on to our show. I get to tell you about Chris Lochhead. So check out this bio. There's so much I could say, but let me just give you a little bit. Chris served as the chief marketing officer of Mercury Interactive, a $1 billion software company that was acquired by Hewlett Packard in November of 2006 for $4.5 billion. Now, in 2001, he co-founded a strategy consulting firm, Lochhead, with Dave Peterson. In 25 years of experience, he has worked with tons of great people, amazing startup companies. He's designed new categories. He has raised capital, built brands, made a lot of friends, traveled 6 million air miles, and in the words directly from his bio, experienced the bliss of winning, the pain of failure, and he learned how to laugh about the whole thing. Now, in our conversation, we take it all over the place. It's a great story about his life. It's a great story about business strategies that he's taken away. So if you run a business out there, you're going to love this. If you're just a lover of life, you're going to love this show because this is a guy who lives it to the fullest. He lives life in the front row. He is no stranger to the slopes, the waves, and an occasional great scotch. Where we connected, by the way, I should tell you, is that I'm introducing Chris on stage at an event called One Life Fully Lived. And you should check it out. It's going to be amazing. It's in October in Sacramento. I'll be keynote speaking there. I will be helping to MC that event. And so I connected with Chris because I'm going to be introducing him. And so our mutual friend, Tim Rode, introduced us. And I'm so pumped about this whole thing. You got to check out the organization. Chris is passionate about it. It is a fantastic event. So they also have one in Philadelphia in June of next year that I'll be speaking at as well. You can catch him on Twitter at Lochhead. That's Lochhead. So here's what we talk about in the show. We get into how successfully a company introduces innovation to the world. We talk about what legendary businesses have done differently. He kind of gets into how he reversed engineered what these incredible companies like Uber and Netflix have done in order to dominate in their market space. We talk about what category design really is and how this could apply to you right now in your business. We have a conversation around validation and feedback. And in case you happen to see my recent blog post about this, that was fun. We get into favorite books and awesome stories, lots of laughs. And if you happen to be listening with your kids in the car, there's a few colorful words that are thrown in here, so take note of that. Definitely a couple F-bombs. I want to say that again. If you're listening with your kids in the car, this might be a good time to switch to the earbuds. A couple of F-bombs coming your way. But this is a great conversation, a lot of fun. Please enjoy this chat with Chris Lochhead. All right, everybody, I'm here with my buddy Chris. And Chris, you are coming from Santa Cruz today?
Beautiful Santa Cruz, California. We're about a block from the, as we love to call it, the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, man. Well, good morning, and thanks for making time for us.
It's a pleasure to be with you and everybody tuning in.
How's the surf looking today?
The surf is small right now, John. As you may know, the surf typically here on the west coast of California is bigger in the winter. The storms coming across the ocean make the bigger swells. But that said, we've had consistent surf throughout the spring and the summer, and so even though it's small, it's been a lot of fun. And man, the weather has been beautiful, so it's been great in the water.
How often do you try to get out?
If there are waves, I try to get in the water. So I surf at least 3, sometimes 5 times a week. It sort of depends what's going on in life, but yeah, try to get in the water as much as possible.
Man, if you could see my face, I'm just smiling ear to ear thinking about that. That's so great. Chris, I want to acknowledge you and thank you for making time today. I know that you live a very fulfilling life, and you and I are new friends. I'm just learning about your world, and so I'm excited to get to know you today. I'm excited to share your story with the Front Row community. But from what I do know, man, I'm honored to have you as a guest, and I'm excited to dig into your world, both the past and the present, because I know you've got some cool things going on. Can you give us a little bit of a highlight reel, man? I like to call this the 60-second brag with my friends, where no hold back. Tell me what's exciting and what you're happy about right now.
I'm happy about life right now. I'm super excited about this One Life Fully Lived conference we have coming up in October.
Right. Yeah.
One Life is just a magical organization we can talk about today if you like.
Absolutely.
And then a little over a month ago, my 3 co-authors and I launched a book called Play Bigger: How Pirates, Streamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. And we wrote it for HarperCollins, Jack Welch's publisher, which was an amazing thing. Hollis is an incredible contributor to the book, and our agent as well, Jim Levine. But so you ask what's exciting. We're excited about the future, October for One Life. We couldn't be more humbled by the response to our book, Play Bigger. It's been a mind-blowing experience for the last month.
That's exciting. Tell me a little bit about, I'm curious because I have a book coming out in November, and I'm curious about the process for you. What did you love in creating the book, and what was tough?
Well, to be candid, not a lot was tough in terms of the actual writing the book. My co-author, Kevin Maney, wrote an amazing blog about it. And the headline of the blog was, because we get asked all the time, how do 4 guys write a book?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting. The publishing industry has no idea how to deal with 4 co-authors. We had some publishers take a pass, and Amazon doesn't know how to list us and things like that. But Kevin wrote a blog post shortly after the book came out, and the headline was something to the effect of writing a book the same way engineers write software and the same way bands write music. And that's what it really was. It was, I know this is a cliched term, but it was a massive collaboration sometimes people ask us, well, who really wrote the book? And well, 4 guys really wrote the book.
Yeah.
And we just developed a process of jamming together, much like a band would. Both Kevin and I are musicians, and so that felt like a natural analogy. And once we sort of got figured out how to really jam well together, writing the book was really the most fun I've ever had in my professional career. And when it was over, and I think I can speak for my co-authors on this as well, we were all sad. It was a bummer when the book was done.
Well, maybe that means that there'll be something down the road for us. That's cool.
Yeah,
I'm not obligating you to that now, buddy. But that sounds like you had a blast, which is great.
Yeah, we did. And it's really, in my work life, the thing I'm most proud of is both the way we wrote the book and the final product as well. Play Bigger is something I'll be proud of for the rest of my life.
That's exciting. You mentioned music. What instruments do you play?
Today, I mostly play guitar. And I would say that I sing, but that's not really accurate. When I sing, I make a good voice. There's a distinction in music between a singer and a vocalist. And Freddie Mercury in rock and roll was a singer.
Yeah.
And David Lee Roth or Joey Ramone is a vocalist.
Got it.
I'm a vocalist. I make a good noise. There's like 4 notes where I sound awesome.
That's great, man. Chris, you've got a fun story, and I want to go back a few years because your life, I mean, right now people might be thinking, man, Chris surfing all this time, he's got a great life, and we'll get more into, what your world's all about. But take us back to the beginning, because I don't think this has been all smooth sailing and perfectly open highway roads for you the entire time. Can you give us a quick walk down memory lane, a little about your journey to where you are today? I know that's a big question. You can take it anywhere you want, but I'm just fascinated by your early days in school and how you transitioned out, got into business.
Thanks, John. Well, I don't know that my story is that different from anybody else's who has found happiness in life. I think many of us have a struggle along the way in one way or another. And so I'm not sure my life is that different. That said, I grew up in Montreal, Canada. I was born in the late 60s, 1968. And so I grew up in the 70s in Montreal, which is an absolutely beautiful city.
I knew I liked you. You were Canadian. I love Canadians.
How's it going, eh?
That's right.
Bonjour tout le monde.
That's awesome.
But at the time, it was a tough time in Canada, and particularly in Quebec. And so, there was a lot of political unrest at the time, and there was a French movement to separate from Canada. And I was born from Scottish parents and grandparents. And so there was all this political unrest. And at one point there was martial law. And so there was real animosity between the French and the English in Canada. So that made it tough. And my parents got separated and divorced when I was about 5. And so I grew up in a very loving environment in terms of my family and my grandparents and my parents. But at the same time, it was a very unstable environment, both sort of politically and socially in Quebec, and also personally with my parents getting divorced. And then as I went through school, the farther I got in school, the more I sucked. And starting in about grade 3, math and reading and anything sort of science, geography, all that stuff started to get really hard. And I found out when I was 21 that I'm dyslexic. So I went from kindergarten through till 18 in school. I got thrown out of school at 18 for being stupid. And it was only a few years later that I found out what was really going on. And my mother, bless her, she didn't know back then dyslexia and ADD and all that stuff weren't well understood. I'm not sure it's all that well understood today, but she found a school that really worked for me, which was a school in Montreal where 50% of the curriculum was music, art, and drama. And so while the worlds of math and science and to some degree reading were shutting for me, and I couldn't figure out why, the world of music, art, and drama was opening for me. And I'll be forever grateful to my mom, and particularly to the teachers who helped cultivate my creative and artistic side. And if you go back and read my old report cards, they all say the same thing, which is something like Christopher's great in music, art, and drama, but he's just not applying himself in math.
That's so interesting because I just went through this process, Chris, with my book where I went through every report card and from grade school. My mom kept everything and I'd never done this. And I'm 41 now and I look back and I realized that every report card was like, he's doing well. He could just do a lot better. The constant message was he's just not enough. It's amazing what that, for me, the meaning that I give to that now and how I think that might have shaped some of my thinking early on about who I was, what my potential was. And it's amazing. I'm so curious. I'm going to go off topic for a sec. What is one of your earliest memories? When did the lights really turn on for you? You just said third grade, but when do you really start recalling your life in detail?
I mean, of course, like most people, I remember lots of things about my childhood, and time is a wonderful thing, because you remember, most of us, I think, remember a lot more good than bad. In general, I had a great childhood. And like I said, my parents, even though they were divorced, they both, it was always super clear to me how much they loved me and how proud they were of me and my sister, Carolyn. And my dad, was a super committed dad, and we would spend, time with him on a very regular basis. And he would take us camping in the summers. And, when I went to Cub Camp, he came as I don't know, whatever they called it, dad, assistant counselor and stuff.
That's
and
cool.
So even though my parents were divorced, I always knew they loved me and were big parts of my life. And my mother was very close to her parents. And so we spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and my grandfather in particular, as a kid, became my idol. His name was John, but everybody called him Jack. And he served in World War II from Scotland. Like a lot of immigrants, came to Canada after the war looking for a better life. And so, I just grew up in a very loving environment, even though it was a tough environment, like I said, about the kind of political environment, the instability in our family. And also, we just didn't grow up with very much from a monetary point of view. And so there was a lot of struggle in our life in that regard. But the struggle came wrapped in a lot of love and a lot of fun.
If you had to pinpoint maybe two values that your parents instilled in you that you're grateful for to this day, what would they be?
Wow, that's an awesome question. I think the first one is do what you believe is right because you believe it's right. That doing what you think is the right thing is what you need to do to make the person who brushes your teeth every morning proud of you. And so my mother likes to tell this story. I don't remember it actually happening, so I only remember it through her story, but she tells me this story about, we have a subway system in Montreal. We call it the Metro, like they do in Paris. And I used to take the Metro to school, the bus and the Metro to school. And we had musicians who would play in the Metro. And she remembers me telling her a story when I was, 10 or 12 or somewhere around there, where I shared with her about musicians in the Metro, and that if I didn't have any change in my pocket, that I didn't feel comfortable standing there listening to them, because I thought if I was going to listen to their music, other than just kind of walk by, but if I was going to stand there and enjoy a song or two or what have you, that I needed to throw some money into their guitar case or their hat or what have you. And if I didn't have that money, then it was the wrong thing to do, to stand there and enjoy the music and not support the musician. And so I think that's a big thing that my parents instilled in me. And somewhere along the line, I also got that anything's possible if you say it's possible. And my life, John, is a giant wasn't going to happen anyways. Or said a different way, my life is a completely unpredictable outcome. And that was because they really instilled in me that, it may sound like a cliche, but anything's really possible.
Now, you eventually, all of this this journey led to being a 3-time tech company CMO. And you've had quite a run in business and entrepreneurship. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I want to get to the book here, and I want to get to all the things you've got going on now. But I want to take a second to sort of break down where you spent a period of your life and what you were doing there.
And again, I don't know that my story is that different from anybody else's story that's found happiness. You sort of have to thrash around until you get it right. As a very young man, of course, it was the arts that saved me, music, art, and drama. And then when I got thrown out of school, I was in a band, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And, like most bands, we kept breaking up and shit would go wrong and whatever. And so while I was trying to make it work in music, my mother was working at the Montreal General Hospital, and she got me a job as an orderly. And so I was working as an orderly on the weekends, and I started that job when I was about 16, 17. And then so by the time I was 18 and got thrown out of school, my band broke up and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I didn't think I wanted to be an orderly for the rest of my life. I remember very distinctly, John, having sort of an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. The angel was the voice of my grandfather, Jack. I called him Granddad. And with his Scottish accent, him saying, "You're the bestest boy in the world." And the devil's voice was my mother saying, "You don't want to grow up to be a bum." And I remember being about that age, and I remember exactly where I was. It was a cold winter day in February in Montreal. It was freezing. I was out walking, waiting for a bus. And I just thought, I'm going to listen to that voice of my grandfather's, and I'm really going to go for it in life. And shortly thereafter, my friend Jack Hughes, who was working at a small software company, and this was back in the mid to late 80s when the PC was really just starting to take off. Jack had a vision for starting a company where we would help major corporations use this new technology and doing training and consulting in PCs, which was a sort of the cutting edge at the time. And so he came to me and said, "Look, this is what I want to do, and I want you to start this company with me." And I said, "Jack, what are you talking about? I can't even do like times tables. Like sort of math was gone for me at sort of 5 times 5, And he said, "Look, don't worry about the technology. You're a great sales guy. You're a great natural marketing guy. You take care of that side of it. I'll take care of the technology side of it, and we'll be great." And so we went to start a company when I was 18 years old. And it was really the only option I had. I had no other options other than be an orderly. I had no money, no contacts, no education, no knowledge of technology, certainly no knowledge of business, and a good friend who wanted to go for it. And so I said, "What the fuck, let's go for it." And we started a company. We thought nobody would buy from us because we were so young. So we grew beards to try to look older. And
That's
this
great.
was when I still had hair, and Jack did too. Jack's sort of in our hair zone or getting there. And we named the company. We knew no one would buy from 2 young guys. So we named the company after a made up guy. And so we called the company Roger Pierce, or in Montreal, Roger Pierce. And so that everybody would think there was this, 55 or 60-year-old dude that we worked for, and we were like junior partners or something like that. And so the company was called Roger Pierce et Associés, or Roger Pierce and Associates, and we were associates.
That's fantastic. I love it. And now I'm going to even fast forward further. I mean, we could spend hours, right, talking about that entire journey, and I'm so tempted to go down that road. And maybe we'll get back there. But I want to fast forward today to this book that you've now written, to Play Bigger. And what's the subtitle of that book? I love it. It's
subtitled "How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets."
So how did you guys choose that?
Well, if you sort of take a step back, for certainly my partners in Play Bigger, entrepreneurship in many ways saved all of our lives, Dave Peterson and Al Ramadan. And in some ways that's true for Kevin Maney, who's, I think, arguably one of the probably 5 best journalists and authors in the tech industry. And so in a lot of ways, entrepreneurship saved our lives. And so when I was 18, I had nowhere else to go other than learning by doing, seeking out mentors and coaches, and by reading. And even though I'm dyslexic, I read like a crazy man back then. I still read a fair amount today, but even though it's difficult for me, but at the time I was incredibly thirsty for knowledge, and there were a handful of books that made a huge difference. And I wasn't sure I'd ever write a book. And a few years ago, a dear friend of ours, Peggy Burke, who's the founder of 1185 Design, who's, I would argue, the greatest design and branding firm in Silicon Valley, and she's an absolute genius. She was really honest to write a book. And what she said, she knew my story, and she knew how important books like David Ogilvy's Ogilvy on Advertising was, and Mark McCormick's What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School, and Michael Gerber's The E-Myth, and then later on books like Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, and many, many others made such a huge difference. She looked at me and she said, "Christopher, where would you be if David Ogilvy hadn't written Ogilvy on Advertising? Where would you be if Michael Gerber hadn't written E-Myth?" And I thought, my life would probably be very different. And she said, "Well, you guys have something like that to contribute, and You should just do the work and get it done. I was blown away by that comment. She inspired, I think, Dave, Al, and I to figure it out. And we knew we needed help. And that's why we brought in Kevin. Kevin was the X factor for us. Talk about why if you want, Kevin Maney. And then the four of us just made an incredible collaboration. And so for me personally, the book's really about giving back as much of the things that I've learned over 30 years that I think could make a difference to anybody who's really trying to find their way in the world, and particularly for executives and innovators and entrepreneurs who are trying to bring new innovation to the world.
So fast forward, I'm going to go deep with this question fast, but fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, and this book has impacted somebody in the way that you would have hoped it would have, right? So they come to you and say, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it is, I read your book, and this is what's changed in my life. What do you hope that conversation sounds like?
So I hope it's really centered around a couple of things, John. The first one is I'll answer with a short story. The first review we remember seeing of Play Bigger was written by a guy, and I could find it if you want, who is actually writing for a library industry publication, and he's been a librarian at a business school for decades. And so he reviewed the book in the context of, for other library directors and heads of libraries in education, in that context, how you should think about this book. And at the end of his review, he said something to the effect of, everybody thinking about pursuing a career in business should read Play Bigger. And I thought, wow, that's it for me. So the first would be that for the younger generation who's thinking about business or is currently in business, either going to work for somebody or being an entrepreneur, for me, I had no option. Nobody was going to hire me. And so I had no choice but to start a company or just continue to work in a hospital, which, I wanted to do bigger things. And so for the people in that stage of their life, I hope it makes that kind of difference, that it inspires them and helps them on their entrepreneurial path. And I have a particular soft spot in my heart for people like me who feel like they have no other option.
Yeah. And
then the other one is, in spite of the fact that we live in a world where we are surrounded by massive innovation, and we certainly are, and I live here right on the other side of the Santa Cruz Mountains from Silicon Valley, and it's an amazing place to live because of the innovation and entrepreneurship that's here, of course, and it's been something that's made a huge difference in my life. But that said, less than 2% of venture-backed startups in our country are ever worth anything and ever really succeed.
Less than 2%?
Less than 2%.
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't have guessed that.
It's a very small number. What we know is in market category after category, one company takes the vast majority of the economics. Those companies are called the category kings. So if you're that company, you win. If you're everybody else, not so much. Even in the Fortune 500, roughly every 25 years or so, John, the Fortune 500 loses 50% of its members. So the adoption rate of new innovation, whether it's from startups or whether it's from large existing companies, is actually dismal. And the question is why? And when you spend your life, as me and my partners have, studying what legendary entrepreneurs do that's different from what most of us do, you learn a few things. And so our hope with the book is that the success rate of new innovation actually changes, and that more entrepreneurs are able to be successful and they find their place in the world and they're able to create categories that make a difference in the world and be the company that reaps the rewards for doing that. So it would be in those two areas that it would inspire young entrepreneurs and young people in business to have a life they might not have otherwise had. And then for people who are already playing, so to speak, that it gives them a new lens on business, and that new lens around this concept we call category design makes a material difference for them in terms of the success they have around introducing new innovation to the world.
Let's talk about that category design concept for a moment. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. If you look at what most entrepreneurs do, John, they start off with an insight of some kind. And that insight is normally predicated on seeing a problem in a particular way. So I live a few blocks from a guy named Jack O'Neill, and Jack's one of my heroes. He's the inventor of the surfing wetsuit, and he's a legend.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
if you've ever heard of
I had an O'Neill wetsuit growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. And maybe some of our listeners have O'Neill t-shirts, and the O'Neill brand's become iconic.
Pretty big.
And Jack's an amazing story. But his most famous quote, and I'm sort of paraphrasing, is something like, "I'm just a surfer who wanted to surf longer."
Yeah.
And before Jack invented the wetsuit, gals and guys who wanted to surf, certainly in Northern California and other climates where it's cold in the water, they would wear trunks and wool shirts and shit like that.
Yep.
And you can't stay in the water that long. And so I'm just a surfer who wanted to surf longer. And that's true for most legendary entrepreneurs. They see something, and particularly a problem. And to quote the Big Lebowski, they say, "This aggression will not stand, man." And they go to work on solving that problem. They become obsessed with that problem. And they build a product centered around solving that problem. That's the first thing they do. And then the second thing they do is they build a company to deliver that product. And then most entrepreneurs think they're done, and they go, "Ta-da! Here's my product." And they tell you normally all about the features of that product. And then here's my company to deliver that. And sometimes the world figures it out, but most of the time the world doesn't. And so what we've realized is that legendary entrepreneurs do three things, not two. They design what they hope is a legendary product, a legendary company, and then they do this thing called category design. And so if you think about it, John, every product or service that we love exists because a legendary innovator or entrepreneur created three things, not two: company, product, and category. So for example, there was no market for automobiles before Henry Ford. And he had to teach the world why an automobile mattered, because no one had a problem getting from here to there before. They would use their horse and buggy, and Bob's your uncle. And when he introduced the automobile, he called the category the horseless carriage, in an attempt to begin to distinguish or to differentiate the difference between the current paradigm and the vision that he had for the world. In our book, we tell the story of another legendary innovator named Clarence Birdseye. Clarence is the category designer of frozen foods. And you and I take for granted, but before the 1920s, you showed up at a grocery store and there was no frozen food. There was fresh food and canned food. And I could share with you the story, but Clarence had an insight and went to work and created a whole new category. And once you begin to realize that, what you realize is that category designers are the legendary entrepreneurs and innovators who introduce the world to new ways of thinking, living, learning, and doing business. And rather than market product features, they teach the world to think about, in particular, a problem in a particular way. And when the world gets the problem, they pull the solution out of that company. And that's why people line up overnight to get the new Apple product. And that's why companies like Facebook hit a tipping point, and all of a sudden we're all on Facebook. And so legendary category designers really teach us how to think about things in a different way. And when we accept their definition, their design, if you will, starting with a problem and then the way you need to think about that problem and therefore the solution, then all of a sudden a whole new market erupts. And they're able to make a giant difference in the world. And it turns out that on average, in the tech industry at least, the category king, the company that designs and ultimately dominates the space, gets 76% of the value of that space. And if you go all the way back to Birdseye Foods to this day is the number one provider of frozen food in America.
So then the question I want to ask is, how do they do that, right? How do they teach the world? And maybe the story is appropriate of how the frozen food came to life, but how do you sum that up? And I get that I'd say it's in the book, but give us a little taste or a story of somebody and how they taught the world.
Yeah, so it's a big part of it. There are many components, but a big part of it is being able to evangelize the category. We like to say the E in CEO stands for evangelist. And legendary category designers that are CEOs spend at least half their time evangelizing the category. And they evangelize it with something that you could think of as a point of view. In marketing, people talk about messaging. What are the key messages? A point of view is very different than messaging. A point of view frames a problem in a provocative way. and then evangelizes the solution, and then shows you and I as customers or potential customers how you bridge the gap from problem to solution using the product or service that we're talking about. So the Birdseye story is really fun. This guy, Clarence Birdseye, in the 1920s, grows up as an outdoors young man, and he takes an interest in taxidermy. And he ends up working
Don't we all?
Yeah, don't we all? I don't know about you, but when I was at Cub Camp, no, I didn't want to do that at all, actually. But
me neither.
And so he ends up working for the U.S. government, and he ends up in northern Canada up on an expedition, and he's up there with the Inuit, the native people in northern Canada, and he's up there fishing. And what he notices is when they catch a fish, if they cook it immediately, it tastes a particular way. Or what they often do, or did at the time, was they catch that fish, they toss it on the ice, and it flash freezes. And what he noticed is when they collect all the fish and they take it back to their, where they live, their village or their community in this frozen state, and then they cook it, there's no difference between how it tasted when it was freshly caught and it was frozen. And that was the aha.
Ah, interesting.
And so Clarence says, well, what if we could flash freeze vegetables and other kinds of meats, et cetera? Then you could have fresh tasting, healthy food year round.
Right.
And think about the 1920s, the 1930s. So Clarence, like all legendary entrepreneurs, gets obsessed with trying to solve this problem. And he creates a company called Birdseye Foods, and he tries to figure out how to do this. And there's a tremendous amount he has to do to build the ecosystem for this category. It's something that category king companies and category designers often do. If you think about the Apple App Store, that's a modern example of an ecosystem. So Birdseye gets busy, and he goes to DuPont, and he convinces DuPont to commercialize saran wrap so he can wrap the food. And he convinces the railways to build special freezer cars so that you can transport the food. And then he has to go to the grocery stores and convince them, A, there will be a market category for this. At the time, nobody's asking for it. And B, he convinces them to buy a whole new kind of refrigerator. And then he convinces refrigerator manufacturers to build that refrigerator to go in the grocery store.
Holy cow.
And then, of course, he has to go to, you and I as consumers at the time, and with his point of view, evangelize why frozen food is different than, in particular, canned food, and why that difference is valuable. And so he runs ads with headlines like, wouldn't it be great to have fresh vegetables in February?
Wow.
And so he begins to, and we talk about this a lot in the book, condition the market to think the way he does.
Yeah.
And to see things the way he does, to accept his vision by evangelizing his point of view. So he doesn't market his features, like say, oh, look, here are all the things about frozen food. Isn't that cool? And like hope that we figure it out. He also has to convince the world that at the time, the context for canned food is canned food is a little bit lowbrow and fresh food is better. He has to try to convince the world that fresh food is kind of gourmet.
Yeah.
It's kind of, very cool, very kind of a little bit hoity-toity. And so he evangelizes the problem, fresh food in February, we can't have that. And then he also kind of positions with his point of view, the concept of fresh food, the category of fresh food as being this sort of, if you got fresh food, you're one of the cool people kind of thing. And so you and I walk into the grocery store today, and there's a lot of frozen food.
That's right.
And it's changed all of our lives. And that's exactly what Steve Jobs did. That's exactly what Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, did. And it turns out when you unpack it, that's exactly what every successful, legendary innovator or entrepreneur did. They were an entrepreneur who didn't leave the category to chance. That is to say, whether they realized it or not, they were also a category designer in that they taught the world with a provocative point of view how to view a problem the way they did and therefore accept a whole new solution. And as a result, They created the market themselves out of nothing.
Is there a singular first step that you try to get people to do when they're creating their own category or designing a category? Is there a starting place, or is it different for everybody based on their situation?
Well, like a lot of things, there are multiple starting places, of course. And what we've tried to do with category design, we feel like category design is more something we discovered than invented. We certainly brought some process and thinking, and the four of us who wrote the book have plus or minus 30 years of experience in the world doing this stuff and thinking about this stuff. So we brought a lot of our own things to it. But the reality is, the biggest insight we had is by studying what legendary innovators and entrepreneurs have done. And we tried to take, for example, what was it that a Steve Jobs or a Clarence Birdseye did intuitively in the way that they mobilized their company to create a whole new category? What did they do intuitively that many of us, for whatever reason, don't have intuitively? How do you unpack that and turn it into a management discipline? And so that's really what category design is. It's a lot more something we discovered and then tried to document and add richness to, so that mere mortals like us can mimic the approaches of a Birdseye or a Jobs or a Zuckerberg. So in that sense, we hope the book's at the beginning of a dialogue, not, certainly not proposing that it's the answer. So to get to your question, John, about where to start, there's multiple places to start, but a couple things to think about. Number one, what's the problem I solve? And what we know is legendary entrepreneurs either solve a problem that we didn't know that we had, or a problem that we had, but we didn't think of in that way. And so, for example, the founders of Uber saw a problem that you and I didn't see, which is, how come I can't press a button on my freaking phone and magically have an awesome car come and get me?
That wasn't happening before I found Uber, right?
That was not happening.
That's right.
You either had to pre-book a limo, you either had to wait for a bus, or, stand on a street corner while it's raining, praying that a cab would go by, or call a cab company. And I don't know about where you live, John, but, where I live, good fucking luck. And so, he saw a problem in a completely different way. Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce.com, one of the legendary category designers in the enterprise software world, saw a problem called, if you have to install a whole bunch of software on your data system, it's hugely hard and expensive and time consuming and so forth. Wouldn't it be great to just go to a website, log in, and then magically have all this incredible functionality, and you don't have to maintain anything, and instead of buying it, you just kind of rent it.
Right.
And as a result, Salesforce.com became the company that, for all intents and purposes, John, created what today we call the cloud.
Yeah.
And Benioff's a billionaire, and Salesforce dominates the market of what's called CRM, customer relationship management, and was really the pioneer of today what we call cloud computing. And so that's what legendary entrepreneurs do. So the first thing is, what's the problem? And how do you think about that problem? And I'm going to use this word on purpose, in a way that's different. And then the second thing is to get really clear about that. An exercise we like to go through is, we call it defining the Frotos. Frotos is a short term for the from tos. So if you think about Netflix versus Blockbuster as an example, if I asked you to write down before Netflix, when we had to drive to a freaking video store, what were all of the components of the experience you and I had going to the video store? If you were to list those out and declare, that's now the past. We want that to be the past.
Right.
What's the future that we see? And so for every from, so I have to get in my car.
Yep.
We now declare that if you're Reed Hastings, that's what you want to be a from. And a two is, I go to my computer.
Right.
And then a from is, they may or may not have the movie I want. And then the two is, you always have the movie.
You always have it. Yep.
And so forth. And so once you identify the problem, you want to immediately get the world to accept that problem and to view whatever solutions to that problem as old immediately.
Yep.
And so Blockbuster went bankrupt. And the reason Blockbuster went bankrupt is because Reed didn't disrupt the video distribution business. He changed the design of the category. And so all of us stopped doing the old way and started doing the new way. And Blockbuster went, hey, where the fuck did the market go?
Right.
And
exactly.
So, A, get clear about the problem, and B, go to work on a very specific list of from-tos of Frotos. And that begins to ground the innovator or the entrepreneur in, okay, what does make me different? And really, what is my vision for solving this problem in the world? Yeah. And then you start to talk about how do you communicate that? How do you build an ecosystem? And how do you rally the whole world around your point of view for this problem? Yeah. And when the world accepts all of that, bang, you have a new category.
So great. It gets me thinking, and I want to continue this conversation with you, Chris, at some point. Maybe at One Life, we'll get a few minutes on it, is to talk about that with our charity, with Front Row Foundation, because I think we are attempting to design a new category with that organization and separating ourselves from others that have been similar in the past. So I'm going to put that on the roster of things to chat with you about, because I think that would be a fun chat, and it would be cool to explore that.
I would love to. And it's interesting. It's the same in the charitable world. It's the same in the political world. And it's the same in people's individual careers. Yeah. There are category designers. There are category kings who get people to think about things in a new way. It's also true in music. So for example, Elvis Presley was not just the king of rock and roll. He was a category king.
Yep.
He's the category designer of rock and roll. He didn't just make the music. He did it in a way that created a new category that educated us about why this music was different. And I use that word on purpose. His music's not better than jazz. His music's not better than Frank Sinatra. He never said that. He said, this is different. This music comes from a different place. It's a different kind of an expression. And he fused together things that others didn't fuse together and designed a whole new niche or category in music. And the interesting thing is, by doing so, he didn't displace jazz or classical or whatever other kind of music. He invented a new kind of music. And then Bob Marley did that with reggae. He was the principal category designer of reggae. And my favorite band of all time, the Ramones, are the category designers of punk rock. And so this concept plays out over and over and over again. That is to say, if you're truly different, if you're truly unique, if you're truly innovative, then you have to, we like to say, the greater the innovation, the greater the education. You have to educate the world as to why that matters. And when the world gets it, bang, you become Elvis or you become the Ramones.
So I'm so glad that we're on this subject. I'm going to take a stab at asking this question, feeling like it does relate to where we are, but if it doesn't, feel free to pass on it, because this has come up for me, Chris, in a couple of conversations recently, and that is the difference between validation and feedback. Like when you have an idea for a new category, or you're stretching into a new space, right? And there's an idea of validating ideas. And then there's an idea of getting feedback from people, adjusting and moving forward. I see them as differently. Like I see validation as confirmation in a way, and feedback as information. I see validation sort of as approval, and feedback as improvement. And then validation is sort of like, make me feel okay or make my stuff okay. And the other one is make me better. Do you have an opinion on the difference of validation and feedback and how they may be applied or utilized in our lives?
This is an awesome topic. As it relates to introducing the world to something innovative, to category design, whether it's validation or feedback, those things are very dangerous. Because by definition, this is something new. Henry Ford famously said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, I would have built a faster horse.
Yep.
And Steve Jobs was always very declarative about this. See, because category designers introduce the world to something new that solves a problem we didn't know we had. So before Netflix, we didn't know that driving to the video store was a problem. Before Facebook, you and I didn't have a communication and connection problem with the people in our lives.
Yep.
We had email, we had the phone, with the postal service, et cetera, right? And so, particularly in the very early stages, asking for feedback or validation could very well be the worst thing you do. Brian Roberts, who's one of the greatest venture capitalists in the world, he's considered by many to be the top healthcare tech venture capitalist, says things go from non-consensus to consensus fast. Now think about a company like Airbnb.
Right.
Nobody wanted to fund Airbnb. One of the founders of Airbnb just wrote a story about how many rejections they got. And in the beginning, you're like, what? Are you guys freaking mental? You guys are going to rent couches? What kind of a stupid millennial idea, and all the legal implications of this, and who the fuck's going to want to do this? I don't want some, stinky kid from Europe sleeping on my couch, or what? I don't, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Dumb idea. Not so dumb.
Not so dumb. No.
Right? Sarah Blakely, the category designer and entrepreneur that created Spanx, a whole new vision, right, for a new category she called shapewear.
Yeah.
In the beginning, people could have looked at it and said, hey, look, there's bras and there's corsets and there's smoothers. And I don't know, I'm not a woman, so I don't wear any of that shit. But they would have argued with her like, no one's going to buy this, right?
Yeah.
There is no market for shapewear.
Yeah.
It's like the old story about the salesperson who goes to a third world country where no one wears any shoes, a shoe salesman who goes, right?
Yes. Great story.
Right? And, nobody wears any shoes. There's no market. Nobody wears any shoes. What an opportunity. That's the distinction.
That's right.
And so be careful in the beginning of feedback. Get really focused on your vision for the problem and how to solve it in the most legendary way. And then when you go to get validation around your point of view and particularly your category design. Mm-hmm. That is to say, when you begin to share your point of view around, wouldn't it be awesome to have fresh food in February? Have that conversation. Don't have a conversation called, do you like the frozen pea?
Yep.
Because most people are going to go, well, I don't need frozen peas. I don't need an automobile.
Feels to me more benefit focused. What's in it for me, or how does this make my life better? It's conversation. Problem
focused.
Yeah. So solving a problem, big problem.
Yes. And so be very wary of feedback. Where feedback and information become important is once you're in the market and you're looking to rev the second, third, fourth, fifth generation of your product, of your business model, and even of your category. Categories evolve, of course, over time, and legendary category designers are continuously expanding what you could think of as their category potential. In those contexts, feedback matters. So if I'm the CEO of Airbnb today, yes, I'm listening to my customers and I'm adding new capabilities and getting their feedback and so forth. But in the beginning, I don't care what they have to say.
Man, that's such a fun subject to talk about. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. That's enlightening. I could talk about this forever, Chris. I really could. I want to get to One Life.
Me both, John.
I know, man. I know. This is great. It's really firing me up. You've got my brain turning here, thinking about how this all applies to my business and our charity. And I want to get to the charity that I know you love and support right now, One Life. We're going to see each other in Sacramento in October for this event. I'm really pumped about it. Our mutual buddy Tim and your friends, with your influence and your contributions, have built this incredible organization, which I got to be a part of here in Philadelphia. I emceed that event and spoke there and met some incredible folks. I've had the privilege of playing with Tim in a couple different groups throughout the year. Can you give us a little breakdown as to, I know you serve on the board right now of One Life. Can you give us a breakdown as to what is One Life Fully Lived, and maybe tell us a little bit about the event that we're going to be hanging out at in October?
I would love to. It's a nonprofit called One Life Fully Lived, as you said. Our big annual conference on the West Coast is October 22nd and 23rd in beautiful Sacramento. What One Life is really about is it's not okay with us that people aren't living to their full potential. And the founder of One Life, who you mentioned, my dear friend and adopted brother, Tim Rode, his father, Raymond, was an educator in a small town in the Sierras, just outside of Tahoe. After Raymond died, Tim really wanted to make a difference in the world and honor his father's memory. And at the time, he was doing a lot of reading about the millennial generation. This is 8-10 years ago, and about how it was forecasted to be the first generation in American history that was less well off than their parents. Hopefully that will not be true. And so that sort of got him thinking. And we thought, well, and there's a huge self-help movement that's exploded over the last 30 or even 40 years, whether it's Oprah or Tony Robbins or things like the Landmark Forum and many others. And so Tim thought, I want to make a difference here, and I want to help give people tools and techniques and an opportunity to live a much better life, and particularly around entrepreneurship and financial management, fitness, and particularly outdoor-oriented fitness. And it's not okay with us that most people are overweight in this country, almost 70%, and that a lot of people never really do anything outside anymore. And so those were really the big things. And then the third one was also your own personal development, what some people might call self-actualization. And so could we put together a community and a program for people that help them look at their financial capability, financial planning? For young people, simple things like how do you balance a checkbook? What's a 401k? How do you save, etc. For those of us like Tim and I who didn't get an education and didn't have a whole lot of options, if entrepreneurship is your path, what's a business you can start? Well, you read about Mark Zuckerberg and you think, okay, well, when monkeys fly from my butt, I'm not going to be the next Facebook creator, right? But you could start the world's most legendary lawn mowing service.
Yep.
And so there's the financial, career, entrepreneur side. There's the personal development, happiness, and there's a lot of rich, true research today on happiness as opposed to just tips and tricks. And then there's a fitness, outdoor. So it's your whole life. And we looked at all of the things that were out there for people. And what we realized is a lot of the ways to learn about those things don't exist in our education system. I don't know why more schools don't teach kids how to balance a checkbook, by way of example. I don't know why we don't teach self-actualization and personal development in more schools. And, fitness programs are getting cut all over the place, and sports programs and so forth. And so Tim said, what if we could bring that to the world and do it as cheaply as possible? That is to say, bring the best content, the best thinkers in the world in these areas. What if they were willing to donate their time and their resources to make a difference to people, and then deliver it in the cheapest possible way? And that's why we're a nonprofit. Nobody makes any money off One Life Fully Lived. As a board member, I make a donation every year. I don't get paid a single dime to be on the board or speak or do any of the other things and so forth. And so we try to deliver the best content and the best community to people who are looking to have a breakthrough in their lives, particularly in these areas, for as close to free as humanly possible. And there's a tremendous amount of resources available for free on our website, onelifefullylived.org. And then, we try to keep the events that we do and our big conferences, as cost effective for people as possible. And in cases where people really want to come and they can't afford it, Tim just gives them a free pass. So that's what One Life is about. And anybody who's looking to better themselves in those areas, I'd encourage you to get involved. It's an amazing group of people.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a huge fan. I talked to you yesterday when we were chatting about how I felt that Front Row Foundation's mission of wanting to go beyond just a single day of supporting an individual, creating this incredible event, but providing them with some resources to be able to live life in the front row. I think when Tim and I met, we're like, oh, we are brothers. We're kindred souls here, man, because we're on two very different paths with our organizations, but yet we know that Front Row Foundation, if anybody listening in the Front Row community, I'm going to encourage you to look at these One Life events as a great place to go and play. And these are the tools. These are the maps. These are the individuals who are living life in the front row, as we would say. And so living fully, that is something that our group really resonates with, Chris. And I know that we're going to have some real exciting momentum going into this event. I'm pumped to be there. I'm excited to be a part of it. I know it's going to be a great weekend in Sacramento. And I just want to thank you for giving your time and your service and your energy to the world in this way, there's a lot of things you could be doing with your time and your resources, but you're choosing to help lift other people up. I remember meeting Kevin Spacey a couple years ago, and he said, maybe he was quoting somebody, but when you've achieved a certain level of success, that you've got to send the elevator back down. And I think that's just a great way of being able to show up in the world and lift others up. So appreciate that, Matt, very much.
Well, it's kind of you to say, and I think there's a couple things about that. Number one, I believe if you've been lucky enough to be successful anywhere in the world, you have a moral obligation. And I don't mean to be on any kind of high horse. I don't mean it that way. I'm just talking about how I personally feel to give that back. You're talking to a kid who had a paper route from the time he was 10 years old. And you're talking to a kid who had a lot of help along the way from many legendary people, some of whom I never met because they wrote books, and some of whom rolled up their sleeves and deeply made a difference in my life. And so I think when people who are lucky enough, like I have been, don't contribute back, and I don't mean this as harshly as it might sound, but I think I'll say it for me personally. If I didn't do it, there'd be a special place in hell for me.
Right.
And so I feel a tremendous obligation. It was my primary motivation for wanting to write the book. I think it was a big part for my partners too, but I'll speak for myself. And I'm just stoked that, Timmy's vision for One Life has taken off, and that I've been able to be a little bit of a part of it, and that the organization has been able to make such a huge difference for so many people.
When it's all over, Chris, and the end is here, as it will be one day for all of us, what do you want to be remembered for?
Well, the first thing I'd say is, look, I'm not confused. Most of us are not going to be remembered for very long, right?
If we're being honest, you're right.
Well,
Yeah.
You think about 2 generations past our death, how many of us are going to be remembered? I mean,
Yeah, I get it.
Most people don't know who the 16th president of the United States was. I'm just pulling a number out of thin air. And so I don't have any delusional thoughts that I'm going to be remembered for centuries or something. So with that said, I hope I'm thought of as somebody who lived my life, who went for it in life, somebody who played bigger, who tried to make a difference. And a dear friend of mine, Tom Dagenet, God rest his soul, said, it's not really where you finish, but it's where you finish in the context of where you started. And so the legacy, hopefully, that I get to leave is one where I was able to take this opportunity that we have in our lives, particularly in this country, in the country that I was born in. We have an opportunity to do things that, the people in Syria don't have an opportunity to do right now because they're focused on a crisis. And so I hope I'm remembered as somebody who took the great gift that I was given, being born into a loving family and being born in a part of the world that allowed me the opportunity to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, and made something out of it in my life, lived my life fully and played bigger, and hopefully gave a lot of that back. And, the other part of it, not to be all serious, is I think Spinal Tap was right when they said, when I asked about their philosophy of life, have a good time all the time. Why not have a good time all the time? And so a big part of life is having fun. Some of us feel guilty about having too much fun. And I'm trying to have an embarrassingly a large amount of fun while doing all that stuff too. My new definition, John, of a great life is when your life is so freaking great that the number of people you could tell your whole kind of story to, the whole picture of your day in and day out life is really small, because most people, wouldn't believe it, or maybe might resent it, right?
Yeah, totally. 100%. Can you paint a picture perfect day for you? What would be like the most fun day? And maybe it's every day of your life, but what does it look like?
It's funny, coming up on my 4th wedding anniversary this September. And when I was getting married, me and my buddies were planning my bachelor party. And my wife, Carrie, says, "Bachelor party? What do you mean bachelor party? Every day of your life is like a bachelor party." And so, on a serious note, I think the definition of a legendary life is, I used to think it was doing what you want, when you want, whatever you want, with who you want. And those things are true for sure for me. But what I've learned over time is there's sort of another level, and that's when you get to co-create your life with people you love.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah.
And so if you look at the data science on happiness, and for the last 10 years, I've been studying happiness from a more of a research perspective. One of the things you learn, for example, is there's no such thing as a lonely centenarian. Centenarian being a person that lives to 100 or greater. And so in a lot of ways, our life is about those relationships, right?
Yep.
And so a perfect day for me is doing things I love to do with the people I love. And so I wake up every morning with a legendary woman named Carrie Cosentino. And I can't believe I get to wake up with her every day. And we live in a part of the world that has become home for me. And I have a deep connection to Santa Cruz, California. And Santa Cruz has taught me that the place that you live can and does really matter. I love being in Santa Cruz, and I could tell you for hours why. So I wake up with a woman that I love in a place that I love, and I hear the ocean when I fall asleep, and I run on the beach, and we've architected a life here, so we have a wonderful garden. We have 7 dinosaurs, as I like to call them, 7 hens who are like kids to us, and they're a blast, and we play with them. And I love the work that I do. I love being with legendary entrepreneurs who are trying to create a company and a product and a category at the same time, and working with some of the most innovative venture capitalists and entrepreneurs in the world here in Silicon Valley. I can't believe I get to do that, man. And then, as I mentioned, I love surfing. I started surfing about 10 years ago. The needle went deep in the vein. And there's something magic about being in the water and riding a wave that in some cases came 6,000 miles. It's the energy of the ocean that you get to stand up on and ride. It's like a mind-blowing experience. And I have a very similar experience when I'm in the backcountry or when I'm skiing. I love mountains and waves. I'm also a martial artist. And martial arts has become an incredibly important part of my life. And so, my life is filled with those kinds of things, and some great wine and some great IPAs and some incredible brothers and friends and an amazing tribe of people. And so when you put all of that together, you co-create your life with a group of people who you're in love with, and you do a set of things, that you love to do and live with them. And so, when my day's filled with those things, I had a great day.
Sounds perfect to me. I'm always talking about build with friends, and we talk in the charity all the time about who's in your front row. Who gets a front row seat to your life? And those are very important things to keep in mind. Love that. Co-create with people that you love. 2 final questions, if I can, Chris. They're easy ones. They're fun, easy. Can I get you for 2 more?
Yeah, I'm all yours, John.
All right, man. This one is a book or a documentary or any film for that matter, any resource that you think should be mandatory for all people to consume or experience.
It's a great question. And I would have many, and it would certainly depend on the context of the question. But there's an amazing movie right now I think everybody should see. It's a documentary film on the research about what makes people happy. And the movie's called Happy.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And it's an amazing film. Watch it. If you're a parent, watch it with your kids, or you're an adult that has young people in your life. And it's one of those great movies where you could stop it and talk about what they just introduced and some of the data that they are presenting. And they do it through wonderful stories. So that's, or with your spouse, with your partners, with anybody in life. It's a wonderful movie that encapsulates a lot of the best thinking on happiness. Like I mentioned, there's great books that have made a huge difference to me. And I think some people have forgotten about them. You go all the way back to How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you're in the marketing world, David Ogilvy's book, Ogilvy on Advertising, is absolute genius. Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma, breakthrough book. There's another book. It's called Zen and the Art
of Motorcycle Maintenance?
Of Making a Living.
Oh.
Zen and the Art of Making a Living. And it's subtitled A Practical Guide to Creative Career Design. And it's written by Lawrence Bolt, Boldt. Legendary book on designing your career. And then if I go back even further, as a younger man, probably the 2 books that made the biggest difference to me were, I read Catcher in the Rye at a time where I was kind of an angry young man and trying to figure out what was going on. And that book made a giant difference to me, as it's made for millions of people. And so I love that book, and I reread it from time to time. And the other one that came a little bit later for me that's in that same genre is Richard Bach's book, Illusions.
Yeah.
It's subtitled Tales of a Reluctant Messiah. And I give that book to lots of people. So those would be a couple. There's lots of
those are great recommendations. We'll link to those in the show notes. That's great.
Cool.
All right, this is the last final question, and it's a fun one. What live event, concert, sporting event, theater, anything, live performance would you most want to see front row? And it still has to be possible to go see, so not something no Presley or anything, but like, what could you go see that you really, really want to sit front row and have a great time?
I think the biggest thrill for me in that regard now would be to sit next to Joe Rogan at a UFC fight.
Sweet. All right.
I'm a huge martial arts fan.
Yeah.
I think Joe is fucking awesome. And it's great on TV, but it would be cool to sit cage side with Joe.
Cool. Have you been to UFC fights before?
So I watch almost all of them on TV. And funnily enough, I have not gone to one live. And
oh, Chris, we got to make this happen, man.
I know I have to go, but I'll tell you, John, the reason I haven't, and this is my grumpy old man. I've been in training since I was 5 years old to be a grumpy old man. I'm getting better at that. The grumpy old man in me fucking hates going to giant live events where there's huge crowds. A few years back, Carrie and I thought it would be a fun idea to go to Scotland, which is my mother country. I was born in Canada, but my mom and dad and grandparents were all born there. Anyway, there's this big outdoor festival in Scotland, headlined by the Foo Fighters and a handful of other bands. And so we thought, let's go to this awesome concert and go visit my aunt who lives there, and this and that and the other. And it was like a one-way ticket to hell. It was like, I don't know, 150,000 people, and it was muddy and stinky, and people were throwing freaking beer all over the place.
You've got some bad anchors here, man. You've got
terrible.
Some bad anchors.
And so the live events that I like to go to, we like to go to shows where it's more small and intimate. You go see Lyle Lovett at a smaller venue, and Carrie's an event planner, and so we have lots of connections in Vegas. And I'm not generally a huge Vegas fan, but one of the cool things about Vegas is the casinos will bring in gigantic acts. Like we can go see Lincoln Park at the Hard Rock Cafe in a bar with like 3,000 people or 2,500 people. And normally you'd be seeing them with 15,000 people. And so I guess my point is, the bigger the crowd, the more I don't want to go. So that's sort of the thing that's been holding me back. And also I like to watch the UFC events with all my buddies. We throw a big party, and Carrie's a great cook, and we drink the beer that we like, and she makes us awesome man food. And we could pause the fights and reenact the moves and do all the things that 48-year-old,
That's awesome.
guys that are still acting like they're 12 get to do. And so those have been the things that have held me back. But you're right, John. I do have to fix it. It's embarrassing that I haven't been, given what kind of a fan I am. And
dude,
so,
I'm going to talk to Hal Elrod. We're going to a fight in Cleveland soon. We're going to get together and mastermind something here to get you to a fight. This is going to be great.
I would love to. It maybe be a fun one life event. I could bring my martial arts.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you know what fight you're going to go see in Cleveland?
Hal would know. I haven't. No, I don't know. This is September 10th. This is so whatever that is. Hal is the master of all UFC details, but it is September 10th, Saturday night. That's where we'll be.
I bet you it's Stipe Miocic, the new heavyweight champion of the world, and AKA baddest man in the world. They call the UFC heavyweight the baddest man in the world. Is from, if I'm not mistaken, the Cleveland area. So my guess is that would be Stipe must be fighting in Cleveland. That would be my guess.
Yeah,
but I could be wrong.
I'll find out soon. I'll find out soon. Very cool. Yeah. But hey, I was going to comment that I really get the small venue thing. A couple years ago, I'm a big fan of a band called Pink Martini out of Portland, and they play music from like the 30s and 40s. It's really classy dinner type music, but it just makes me so happy. And I saw them at a vineyard. And I had an epic day. I have a buddy out there who's a donor to our charity, and he happens to own a Ferrari that we drove to this vineyard, saw this concert with about 100 people overlooking a vineyard at somebody's house. And just the fact that we were in this small, intimate setting, and I got a chance to talk with the singers, and they were singing with the Von Trapp grandchildren at this time. The Von Trapp grandchildren were doing the front row pose, and we had this great day, but you don't get that when there's 500,000 people around.
That's right.
I totally understand and appreciate the value of those smaller, intimate settings, because you really do get front row to the thing that you're there to see. You get a better seat, you get a better experience.
Yeah, I mean, one of my co-authors, Dave Peterson, and I, several years ago now, we were at the Warfield in San Francisco to see Iggy Pop and the Stooges, the original Stooges, who are now passed away, on Iggy's 60th birthday. And we were right there, front row, in the mosh pit. And they opened the show with "I Want to Be Your Dog," and Iggy is stage diving. For those of you who don't know, Iggy's considered the godfather of punk and the inventor of stage diving, and on his 60th birthday. And we're in this crowd right there, front row. And it's like, there's Iggy. And it's like, holy shit, this is incredible.
Yeah.
So that's the experience.
That's it.
And by the way, UFC fans out there, it's UFC 203, September 10th. Miocic against Alistair Overeem is the headline main event for the title of heavyweight champion, aka baddest man in the world.
It's exciting.
In Cleveland, Ohio, Stipe's hometown.
Hey, speaking of the baddest men in the world, where do people get the book? Where should we send them for Play Bigger?
Well, one of the wonderful things about partnering with the amazing people at HarperCollins and what's called Harper Business, their business division, who have been beyond kind and supportive to us in a way that we certainly didn't deserve. But one of the great things about partnering with one of the most legendary publishers in the world is our book is everywhere. And so you can get it at most physical bookstores. I don't know about you, but I still love physical bookstores. We have a legendary independent bookstore here in Santa Cruz, and that's my favorite place. I know it's super convenient to go to Amazon, and we love Amazon, but we love the locally owned bookstores. So we're in most locally owned bookstores in your business section. Of course, we're on Amazon and in all flavors of Amazon, Kindle, and the audio book was read by one of the most legendary audio guys in the country. So you can get it in whatever format that you want. There's a great niche site called 800 CEO Read that is a business oriented book website that's been incredibly kind and supportive of us, and they help make us a bestseller. And so, yeah, really, barnesandnoble.com, anywhere where you would buy a legendary business book is hopefully where you'd find us.
Yeah, so great. Well, Chris, I want to thank you again for your time today. I hope everybody gets a copy of the book. Mine is on order right now, so I'll be reading it probably in a couple days, and I'm excited to review it and share with you my thoughts. But today was awesome, and I feel like this was a legendary call. You are just a tremendous individual. I want to say thank you for making a difference in the world. And I say this to all my guests and all my friends, and I really mean this, that I believe you're having a direct impact on my children's lives because you're shaping a community and a space that they're going to grow up in, that they are growing up in. And because of that, I personally want to say thank you for influencing my children's lives with your contributions to the world. I can't wait to see you in October at the One Life event. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. And that's it for today, man. But many great days ahead for us.
Hey, John, thank you so much. It's really been it's been my pleasure being with you and being with your listeners. I wish all of you legendary success, and hey, play bigger.
Thanks, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Lochhead. I love that guy. Such a fun conversation. Can't wait to spend time with him at the One Life event in Sacramento. Make sure to check out onelifefullylived.org. That's the number one, lifefullylived.org. And you can get more information. I'll be there. Hope to meet you in person at that event. Also, it looks like we're going to have a speaker trainer experience immediately following that One Life event. So if you are somebody who wants to level up in the area of speaking, training, or presenting, we are going to be hosting a live event immediately following the One Life Fully Lived event in Sacramento in October. So make sure to check that out. Go pick up Chris's book, Play Bigger. It is available on Amazon and in all the stores. We'll link to it in the show notes. And I've got to tell you that if you were inspired by Chris, make sure to reach out to him and give him some love on Twitter at Lochhead, Lochhead. We'll again link to that as well. So that is it for today, everybody. Thanks so much for taking a listen. Again, if you didn't hear the early part of the show, check out the Dad's Retreat, the 2-day live event we have coming up in Philadelphia. It's going to be awesome. If you are a father out there listening, please go to frontrowfactor.com/dads and just check out the video, check out the page, see if it's something that looks good. And if so, there's a link there that you can apply to. Catch me on social. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Jon Vroman, JONVROMAN. Let's do this thing together. Let's have some fun living our lives in the front row. Tomorrow is guaranteed to nobody. And we've got to take action today. We've got to have hope for something down the road. We've got to then live in the moment, and we have got to celebrate our experiences along the way. Let's keep crushing our fears, creating some epic moments, and celebrating all of that together. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. Can't wait to have you back on the next show. Cheers.
That's all for this episode of The Front Row Factor. To discover more simple and effective ways to lead a fearless front row life, visit frontrowfactor.com and subscribe to Jon's 4 Minutes in the Front Row, where he shares quick stories from real-life experiences. Thanks again for joining us today. We hope our show inspires you to live big, give big, and experience life to the fullest. See you next week on The Front Row Factor.